So today we are going to discuss on blast furnace, very important topic, that is on voids. So in this presentation, we are going to discuss so many things, and at end of the presentation, the critical deliverables are like these. The first, the metallurgical distinction between the average and harmonic mean size, which is very important. Second, the stones and sand reality that dictate gas permeability. And third, a diagnostic framework to prevent the degradation phases that lead to catastrophic furnace hanging. So on the title slide, as you look at the orange arrow weaving through the black coke matrix, that is the lifeblood of the reactor. So if those path closes, the furnace dies. To keep those path open, we have to look at the pressure dynamics that allow the furnace to breathe. Coming to our second slide, which is about the breathing mechanism of the furnace. So the blast furnace is a counter current reactor, and its heartbeat is gas flow. So notice the alternate red ferrous layer and black coke layer. The total furnace pressure drop across the entire stack is approximately 1.2 bar. But look closer at the microscopic pressure difference between the sequential coke layers. It is merely 0.03 to 0.04 bar. So that teeny gradient is what drives the gas through the dense ore layer. The so what here is absolute. If your coke permeability is compromised, that 0.04 bar difference vanishes. Gas flow choke and your buoyant descent grinds to a halt. We rely on the cook to be the breathing room for the entire operation. So without a stable voidage, you lose control of your kinetics, and your fuel rate will skyrocket as you fight to keep the furnace moving. But how do we actually measure that breathing room? It starts with understanding two very distinct metrics, and uh, here we are discuss those two metrics. So um, what are we measuring actually? So in the lab we use two primary sizing metrics, but they tell very different story. So on the left, you see a scale weighing a large coke lump. This is a average mean size, or AMS. It answers a simple question: what is the average mass of the particle? It's essentially a proxy for the bulk volume. Now look at the grid-like diagram on the right representing HMS, or harmonic mean size. So HMS answer only question that matters to the gas. How much breathing room is left between the particle? Here is the critical. So what? AMS is mathematically blind to the presence of small points. You can have a robust AMS while your furnace is actually choking. HMS, however, is mathematically designed to penalize fines. If you only track AMS, you are operating with a blindfold on. To make this concept stick, let us use an analogy every engineer in this room can visualize. So think about a simple bucket. On the left, we have a bucket of large stone with a blue arrow showing perfect unobstructed airflow. This represents a state of a high AMS and high HMS. Now look at what happened when we add just a handful of sand. The stones are still there. The average weight, or AMS, of the bucket has been changed. But look at the blue arrow now. They are trapped at the bottom. The sand has instantly plugged the gaps, destroying the breathing room or HMS. In our world, sand represents the coke fines generated by degradation. The operational impact is a massive increase in blast pressure and decrease in gas utilization. A teeny fraction of fines can physically destroy the voidage of a theoretically great batch of coke. So this is not just an analogy, there is a specific aerodynamic logic behind why HMS is our master metric. So as you must be knowing that permeability is essentially a battle against aerodynamic drag. Visual on the left showing a red drag spark between particle. Every time gas has to flow around a surface, it encounters resistance. When coke break down, those teeny fines exponentially increase the total surface area within a given volume of the burden. More surface area means more drag, which require higher blast pressure to force the gas upward. This is why metallurgical research proves that the gas flow resistance has the absolute highest correlation with HMS, not AMS. So the so effect is factor for which your daily shift when HMS drops, the pressure requires to maintain your wind volume goes up. If you hit the blower's limit, you have to cut wind, which means you lose productivity. Protecting HMS is quite literally protecting your plant's bottom line and total metal output. So let's put some real number to this so you can see how the math actually work in the lab. So coming to this slide which is about a mathematical proof, a 100 kg mixture we have already taken in order to show off this. So, so let's walk through a practical example we have prepared. So we have a perfectly mixed 100 kilogram batch of feed coke. Pi 1 consists of 20 kilogram of small stuff at 25 millimeter. Pi 2 has 30 kilogram of medium stuff at 35 millimeters. So and pi 3 is our large stuff 50 kilometers at 50 millimeter. Uh, so we are going to calculate the aerodynamic survival rate of the specific mixture using both method. So as an engineer, you need to see how these two formula treat the exact same pile of rock differently. One will give you a sense of security while the other will give you a warning. So let's start with the standard weight based calculation that most of our junior technicians rely on every single morning during the shift change. So step 1 is calculating the AMS, the number that usually makes everyone feel safe. So while calculating AMS, the average weight, here is the math for the average mean size. So we take our fractions 0.2, 0.3 till 0.5 and multiply them by their respective sizes. The result is a robust 40.5 millimeters. AMS look at this mixture and report a healthy, robust average. It treat a 25 millimeter rock and a 50 millimeter rock proportionally by their weight alone. So this is what I call the false security. On paper 40.5 millimeters look like a great day at the scenes, but this number doesn't account for the fact that the 20% of a small material is going to mitigate and fill the voids created by the 50% of large material. So it's a weight based lie that ignore the physical reality of how particle pack together inside the high pressure environment of the stack. So now let's look at the same mixture through the lens of harmonic mean size formula. So calculating the HMS, now look at the change in the formula. So HMS calculated weight average of 1 divided by the size fraction. So mathematically this amplifies the flow choking reality of those 25 millimeter fines. So we can say, notice how that a small fraction pull down the entire score. The result is 37.6 millimeters. We haven't changed the coke, we have just changed how we measure it. The truth is that the gas feels like it's flowing through a 37.6 millimeter bed even though the weight says 40.5. So what? Here is that HMS provides a 7% reality check on your permeability. It forces you to acknowledge the damage that the smallest particle are going to do with the void. So HMS is the metric that actually cares about the gas. When we compare these two numbers, we find a gap that explains almost all of our unexplained pressure spikes. So unmasking the 2.9 millimeter gap. So look at this gauge. The AMS needle is sitting comfortably in the green safe zone at 40.5 millimeters. But look at the HMS needle. It has dropped into the wearing zone at 37.6. This 2.9 millimeter difference represent the hidden friction in your furnace. So operating on AMS alone gives a false sense of security, masking the true aerodynamic drag building within the burden. So why does this 2.9 millimeter matter? Because it's a difference between a stable furnace and one that is on the verge of a pressure excursion. So this gap is where where your profit margin disappear into wasted fan power and inefficient gas solid contact. So as supervisor, you must train your team to look at the warning zone. So because So if we go on the same slide, so because that is one that predict your next shift stability. So but where do these finds comes from? We have to understand the journey of the single coke lump. So to manage the HMS, we have to understand how 50 millimeter lump become a pile of dust. So follow the coke's descent. In the granular zone, the lump is uncracked and grey, and as it enters the cohesive zone at around 10 to 15 meter down, the lump begins to shrink and develop the surface crack. By the time it reaches the active zone, it is engulfed in the dust particles and finds smaller than the 10 millimeter. So notice the crash on the graph. The HMS stay steady until the cohesive zone and then it drop like a stone. The so what is that your coke must be engineered to survive this journey. If it degrades too early in the stack, your HMS crashes before the gas can even finish its work. This degradation happens in two distinct phases, starting with chemical attack. So phase 1, coming to the phase 1, which is about a chemical attack which doesn't break the coke. It primes the coke to be broken to the porous glowing coke. So looking at two targets, target 1 shows the solution loss or the CO2 attack at 1000 to 1300 degree in the cohesive zone. The carbon react with CO2 to form carbon monoxide. These falling out the matrix create a sponge-like porous surface. Target 2 shows alkali penetration, where vapor from the circulation zone destroy the inherent skeleton strength. This is a critical metallurgical concept. The cooked lump is now a hollow shell of its former shell. The so what? Here is that high CRI. So coke will hollow out faster, leaving you with a bed that looks solid but has a zero structural integrity. So it's ready to crumble the moment you physical pressure is applied. And that physical pressure comes in phase 2, leading to the final crash of your permeability. So now phase 2, the crash, once the coke is chemically weakened, mechanical abrasion finishes the job. So the diagram of lump grinding in a drum, as these pieces grinding together under the weight of burden, that porous sponge-like surface we see the saw rub off. This creates thousands of tiny fines, and so follow the countdown. 60 millimeters becomes 55, 55 to 45, 45 to 38. Then warning light flashes. So once HMS drop below 35 millimeters, you are in red zone. So the operational impact is the total loss of the gas distribution system. So these fines mitigate into a dead man area of the hearth, potentially leading to an inactive hearth center. This mechanical crash is what turns a high performing furnace into a liability. So we must prevent this abrasion at all costs through high CSR coke. If we fail to prevent this crash, the furnace respond with the two of the most dangerous conditions in iron making. So when HMS drop, the furnace choke. Look at the force balance diagram on the left. So when HMS is choked, gas pressure spikes violently to the blue arrow pushing down. If that upward gas force exceed the downward weight of the burden, you get hanging. The descent completely stop. Now look at those spikes, those are slips. That's when the trap pressure violently releases, the unsupported burden collapses, destroying your internal layers. So, so here is about safety and cost what is being explained. So a slip can damage your cooling steps, blow out your bleeder valves and set unreduced material into the breath, chilling the blast furnace. So a choked HMS is a ticking time bomb for your production schedule. We must manage the void to manage the risk. So what are the international standard we need to hit to stay out of the danger zone? So this table is your insurance policy. So these are the benchmark for a high productivity furnace. First, your target AMS must be 40 to 60 millimeters. That's your baseline weight. But second and most importantly, your HMS must stay between 35 and 50 millimeters. Fine smaller than 10 millimeters must be kept under 2%. And finally, look at your hot strength or CSR. It must be above 58% to resist that thermo-chemical weakening we discussed. So if your starting input as HMS is not well above 35 millimeter, the inevitable internal degradation will guarantee a choked furnace before the end of the day. So these are not just suggestion, they are the physical prerequisite for the furnace survival. So adherence to this target is how we protect our campaign life. So let's wrap this up with 4 golden rule every engineer here needs to memorize. So Coming to our the conclusive slides, so colleague, the uh, health of our blast furnace is retained in the gaps between the coke. So rule number one is measure what happens. So AMS tells you the weight, but HMS tells you if the furnace can breathe. So rule number two, beware the fines, as we saw in the stones and sand analogy. So a teeny fraction of dust can destroy a great batch of coke. So rule number three is anticipate the descent chemical attack, soften the coke, and mechanical abrasion, grind it into flow choking dust. And rule number four, guard the input, strict adherence to that 35 millimeter HMS target is your only real insurance policy against hanging and sleep.